Before you scroll past this, stop for a moment. Breathe. Stay with me because this is not small and it is not random. There is a message sitting between silence and regret, and it has been building for much longer than you think. Someone has been carrying words they never said, feelings they never handled, and a truth they tried to keep buried under distance, routine, and pride. They looked calm. They acted fine. They made it seem like life kept moving and nothing inside them was shaking. But that was never the full story. What they pushed down did not disappear. It stayed there. It waited. And now it is rising all at once. Something in them has shifted hard and fast, not because they suddenly became fearless, but because they are starting to understand what losing you would really mean. Not in theory, not one day, for real, right now. That is why this energy feels heavy. That is why the silence feels louder lately. That is why your heart may have been sensing pressure you could not fully explain. This is not about asking you to run back. It is not about telling you to trust too quickly. It is about seeing clearly what has been hidden. Because someone who stayed quiet for too long is now being forced to face the cost of that silence. And the next part matters, so do not skip this, because what they feel is intense, but intensity alone changes nothing. For a long time, this person did not truly move on. They only went still. They took everything they felt and pushed it into the background. They told themselves silence was easier. They told themselves distance was safer. They told themselves if they waited long enough, the feelings would fade, the tension would settle, and the connection would somehow remain exactly where they left it. But hidden feelings do not vanish just because they are ignored. They get heavier. They grow in dark places. They turn into pressure. What felt manageable at first slowly became exhausting. Every avoided message, every unfinished thought, every moment they almost reached out and then stopped. It all collected inside them. They did not know how to hold what they felt, so they locked it away. They did not know how to speak honestly, so they chose delay. They did not know how to face discomfort, so they called avoidance taking space and pretended it was wisdom. But deep down it was fear. Fear of being seen too clearly. Fear of saying something real and not being able to control what came next. Fear of loving badly. Fear of not being enough once things became serious. So instead of showing up, they stayed vague. Instead of being honest, they stayed hard to read. And while they were protecting themselves from one kind of pain, they were creating another kind that would not stay buried forever. That is the part they are finally starting to understand. Silence does not pause consequences. It builds them, quietly, slowly, and then all at once. Something happened that shook them awake. Maybe it was a memory they could not push away. Maybe they heard your name when they were not prepared for it. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of who you were to them, and for the first time, the truth hit without a filter. Or maybe life just became quiet enough that they could no longer hide from themselves. Whatever it was, it landed hard. The thought did not come gently. It came with force. They might really lose you. Not someday. Not in a dramatic scene. Not in some loud ending. But in the quiet way that matters most. When someone slowly stops leaving the door open inside their heart. That realization brought panic with it. Late-night panic. Empty phone panic. The kind that shows up when distractions stop working and silence starts asking the questions they have been dodging for too long. And in that silence, one truth became impossible to ignore. Nobody made them feel understood the way you did. Nobody read their mood so quickly. Nobody gave them emotional safety without making them feel trapped. Nobody held space for them in that rare, calm way that asked for honesty but never forced it. That is when the urgency started growing. But listen carefully because this matters. Urgency is not always pure love. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is the shock of realizing that something deeply valuable was treated too casually, and now it may not be there when they finally decide they are ready. What is making this so painful for them is that explanation alone cannot fix it. They can tell themselves they were overwhelmed. They can say they were confused. They can repeat stories about timing, stress, pressure, or needing room to think. But none of those stories erase the impact of what happened. Your experience matters. The absence mattered. The inconsistency mattered. Even if they did not mean to hurt you, the pattern still left a mark. And that mark is not imaginary. Trust is not built by feelings in one powerful moment. It is built by repeated moments over time, by presence, by steadiness, by what someone does when it is not easy. They are beginning to see that emotional depth without direction only creates confusion. They did feel a lot, but they did not have the strength to carry those feelings with clarity. So they turned inward. They delayed. They stayed in their head. They imagined conversations instead of having them. They waited for the perfect moment instead of choosing an honest one. And while they were doing that, emotional debt kept growing. That debt is what they are facing now. Because when someone disappears into themselves too many times, the connection changes. It becomes more careful, more guarded, more tired, less willing to trust words without proof. That is what they did not expect. They thought what was real between you would simply remain there, untouched, until they came back with better understanding. But real connection does not freeze in place. It responds to what it receives. And when what it receives is uncertainty, it learns caution. There is another part of this they are struggling to admit. They can feel that you have changed. Your energy is different now. The way you speak is different. Even your quiet has changed. You may still care, but you are no longer chasing clarity from someone who kept avoiding it. You are no longer standing in that painful middle place where you do all the emotional work and call it hope. You are no longer repeating your value to someone who should have recognized it without being convinced. That shift in you unsettles them deeply because for longer than they should have, they leaned on your patience. They leaned on your softness. They leaned on the idea that no matter how slowly they moved, no matter how inconsistent they were, you would still be there, understanding them one more time. They confused your gentleness with permanence. They confused your care with endless waiting. They thought your heart would keep the door open forever just because you loved deeply. But then something changed. Quietly, you started choosing yourself. You started pulling your energy back from what kept hurting you. You stopped building your emotional life around their uncertainty. And that change said more than 1,000 arguments ever could. Because calm distance is different from emotional pain. Calm distance means clarity has arrived. Calm distance means self-respect has stepped in. Calm distance means the chapter may be closing without noise. And that kind of closing is the one they fear most because it does not beg, it does not chase, and it does not turn back easily once peace has taken root. What they are really afraid of losing is not only you as a person, it is also what they felt when they were with you. The safety, the honesty, the strange relief of being seen without being judged. The rare feeling of being understood without having to explain every detail. They depended on that more than they ever admitted. And now they are realizing that not every broken connection gets rebuilt, not every absence gets repaired, and not every person who leaves an opening in your soul can be replaced by someone new. That truth keeps finding them in quiet moments. It shows up when they compare other people to you and instantly feel the difference. It shows up when they remember how naturally you noticed what was wrong before they said a word. It shows up when they think about how many times you offered presence while they answered with hesitation. So yes, they want to reach out. They want to explain. They want to say sorry in a real way, not in some half-defensive way that protects their ego. They want to tell the truth, but fear still blocks them. They type messages and erase them. They imagine long conversations and never make the call. They replay outcomes in their head until every possible choice feels dangerous. Because deep down they know something difficult. If they come forward now, words will not be enough. They will have to face the version of themselves they have spent a long time avoiding. And that is exactly why they keep freezing between longing and action. Keep watching, because this is where most people misunderstand what is really happening. This is not a promise that everything will work out. It is not a fantasy, and it is not a sign that everything can return to the beginning just because the feelings are stronger now. What is happening is more raw than that. They are finally admitting to themselves that they were wrong to treat you like you would always be there. They did not fully understand your value until they felt the emptiness that came after your energy changed. And that late understanding hurts more because it arrives with the fear that they may have already lost their chance. They are replaying old memories now, and moments they once acted like were small suddenly feel heavy. They remember how you checked in with them for no reason other than care. They remember how you tried to understand before blaming. They remember how you stayed steady while they pulled away. They remember how often you gave grace when a colder person would have walked away sooner. And those memories sting because of what they reveal. You were meeting them at a depth they were not ready to meet within themselves. You were asking for presence, not perfection. You were asking for honesty, not intensity. You were asking them to show up as the person they said they were. But instead of choosing courage, they kept choosing comfort. Instead of choosing directness, they kept choosing delay. Instead of stepping into something real, they waited for readiness to magically appear. But readiness is not magic. It is a decision. And they kept making the opposite one while expecting the connection to survive on your effort alone. Now they are caught in an inner battle that is harder to hide from. Part of them wants closeness. Part of them wants to apologize. Part of them wants to finally say the exact words they should have said much earlier. But another part of them is terrified because they know closeness asks for consistency, and apology asks for changed behavior, and honesty asks for sustained effort, not one emotional speech. They imagine showing up as a better version of themselves. They imagine saying the perfect thing that explains everything. They imagine one brave moment that fixes the whole distance. But real life does not work like that. Imagination is easy. Reality costs something. Reality asks them to keep showing up after the emotion cools down. Reality asks them to be reliable when the fear returns. Reality asks them to prove change through action again and again until trust has a reason to breathe. And that is where they feel exposed. Because somewhere inside, they know you are no longer looking for beautiful words. You are looking for what is real. You are looking for behavior that does not disappear the second discomfort arrives. You are looking for honesty that survives pressure. And they do not know yet if they can fully become that version of themselves. That is why their energy feels mixed and uneven. Their heart is pulling one way while their old habits pull another. They are standing at the edge of a real choice. Keep hiding and lose you slowly, or speak honestly and face the work they have delayed for far too long. That is the threshold they are standing on now. And while they are wrestling with all of this, something important has already happened in you. You grew. You sat with sadness instead of chasing someone through confusion. You let reality teach you what hope alone could not fix. You stopped begging for consistency from someone who kept offering emotional fragments. You started choosing peace over possibility. That does not mean you never cared. It means you finally cared for yourself too. And that changes everything. Because once someone has felt the peace that comes from no longer living inside another person's mixed signals, it becomes much harder to return to emotional chaos just because the other person is now afraid. This is why their fear keeps growing when they sense your calm. Anger they understand. Tension they understand. Emotional drama they understand. But your calm unsettles them because calm often means acceptance. Calm means you are not fighting reality anymore. Calm means your self-worth is no longer waiting for their recognition. Calm means their approval does not carry the same power over you. And that may be the most uncomfortable truth of all for them. They are realizing that you may no longer be building your future around whether they choose to finally step up. You may be moving forward from a place of dignity, not bitterness. You may be done without needing a dramatic ending. And for someone who relied on your emotional availability for a long time, that quiet strength in you feels more final than any argument ever could. That is why this pressure has become so intense. It is not only about losing access to you. It is about losing the version of you who kept leaving the light on for them, no matter how long they stayed away. So, what does all of this actually mean for you? It means you do not measure this situation by what they might be feeling in one emotional moment. You measure it by what has been shown over time. Feelings can rise fast. Regret can hit hard. Awareness can appear overnight, but reliability reveals itself slowly. It is built through repeated actions, not sudden emotion. This is where many people get pulled back in. Someone becomes scared. Someone finally admits what they lost. Someone comes close with intensity, and it creates a powerful urge to reopen the door immediately, to smooth over what felt unfinished, to believe that pain itself must mean transformation has already begun. But pain is not proof. Fear is not proof. Missing you is not proof. Real change has a pattern. It has continuity. It has accountability. It remains present after the panic fades. And your body knows this even if your heart still feels soft. Your nervous system remembers what inconsistency felt like. It remembers waiting. It remembers silence. It remembers trying to stay relaxed while learning to expect withdrawal. That part of you does not respond to grand statements. It responds to stability. It responds to patterns. It responds to what keeps happening when nobody is performing emotion. So if they do return, the question is not whether they now understand your value. The question is whether understanding becomes behavior. The question is whether the next version of this connection is actually different, not just emotionally louder. Because recognition without change becomes repetition. And repetition is what shapes the future, not insight alone. That distinction matters more than almost anything else here. They are learning this the hard way. They are beginning to understand that loving someone, or even deeply missing someone, does not automatically make a person ready. A person can feel desperate and still not know how to sustain closeness. A person can want another chance and still be carrying the same patterns that damaged the first one. A person can speak beautifully and still disappear when vulnerability asks for consistency. That is why this moment is bigger than a confession. It is a mirror. They are being forced to look at how often they chose safety over truth, avoidance over honesty, delay over courage. They are being forced to ask what their silence cost you, what their distance created, what kind of person they became in the moments that mattered most. And no excuse softens that fully. Understanding too late does not erase someone else's experience. Good intentions do not cancel out repeated absence. An apology without change is only sound. They know that now, even if they do not like how it feels. That is part of why they have been so restless. They do not just fear losing you, they fear what losing you reveals about them. They fear that if they let this pass without growing, they will have to live with the truth that something rare came into their life, and they did not know how to hold it with care. That thought is heavy. It follows them. It sits with them in the quiet. And whether they are ready or not, it is pushing them toward a moment where they cannot keep pretending they do not know what is at stake. If something real comes after this, it will not come as a dramatic performance. It will not need endless explanation. It will show itself in smaller, steadier ways. In follow-through, in emotional honesty that does not collapse under pressure, in actions that stay consistent after the urgency fades, in accountability without defensiveness, in presence that does not retreat the moment things become difficult. That is what transformation looks like. Not panic, not longing, not one intense confession. So if you have felt a strange heaviness, a pressure in the silence, a shift that is hard to name, you are not imagining it. Something is moving. Something in them is waking up. But waking up is only the beginning. Awareness is not the same as change. Regret is not the same as readiness. Wanting access to you is not the same as becoming safe for you. And this is where your clarity matters most. You do not have to move at the speed of their realization. You do not have to reopen your heart just because they are finally feeling the weight of what they delayed. You are allowed to watch. You are allowed to wait. You are allowed to require proof. You are allowed to choose peace over potential if potential has already cost you too much. And if what they feel is true in a lasting way, it will not disappear when patience is required. It will remain. It will act. It will grow roots. Until then, what exists is awareness. Important, yes. Meaningful, yes. But still only awareness. And awareness without lived change is where many stories begin again in the exact same pain.